Welcome, everyone, back to Fortunate Fishes. My guest is the co-founder and CEO of kindness.org. And before you check out thinking this is going to be soft, hold on. This woman spent years at Charity Water with my friend Scott Harrison, helping raise over $100 million for humanitarian causes. She's a hard-nosed operator who got tired of watching the world just get meaner and meaner and decided to do something about it with science, not sentiment. She and her team are on a mission to prove that kindness is really a performance metric. They've built evidence-based programs for schools, corporations, and communities around the world. They've created a kindness quotient. You've heard about EQ, IQ. Well, this is KQ for how kind you actually are. She hosts her own podcast. She's an author. The New York Knicks honored her at Madison Square Garden. She rang the closing bell at the NASDAQ for the World Kindness Week. And she's absolutely convinced that kindness is humanity's greatest untapped superpower. So please welcome R360's strategic ambassador, Jaclyn Lindsey. From my perspective, kindness has a PR problem, doesn't it? I mean, most people hear that word and think weak, soft. How do you walk into a room full of hard-nosed executives, or like you did in 3 groups in South Florida with people whose average net worth is $600 million, and convince them that this is something really serious?
Great question. And probably one of the questions I'm asked most. And it goes back to the metrics. When we can point to the bottom line, I think that gets everyone's attention. And there is enough evidence to validate that that's what kindness is. It's a strategic investment. It's not a soft skill. And it has the power to influence not just your workplace and your bottom line, but your well-being, societal well-being, progress. Our evolutionary background is based on cooperation and how we worked together as a species to get to where we are. So everything points back to the science, and we use that as the foundation to really compel and inspire people to understand why this is a worthwhile investment.
Now, you got a kindness quotient like IQ. Walk me through what that actually measures, because the concept is kind of wild to me.
Yeah. So kindness.org, as a nonprofit, we're coming up on 10 years. And from the beginning, day one was focused on how do we establish metrics around something that's quite nebulous. I'm sure you can imagine the skepticism we've been greeted with ever since we've spoken about kindness as something to prioritize. And I knew one of the biggest areas we would need to focus on is how do you show the impact? How do you really get something like a virtue or a value to be seen as something that is measurable? And so we brought in a team of scientists. Our lead scientist is an affiliate with the University of Oxford, and we really challenged him to figure out how do we develop tools that can measure kindness in a meaningful way that not only contributes to our scientific understanding, but also to the world at large. And so he spent several years developing what is now called the KQ. This is rooted in years of research with over 25,000 participants that helped us understand how kindness shows up around the communities and how we choose kindness as individuals. We did this research looking at a variety of recipients, including family, friend, neighbor, stranger, coworker. And then out of that, we were able to create a really short 3-minute kind of BuzzFeed style personality questionnaire. Would you do this? Would you do that? But it is based on very, very precise back-end analytics that helps you as an individual know how kind you are and how you're showing up in the world. And so it's based on behavioral actions and choices. And from that, it's really a hook to get you to examine your internal kindness, and from there start to make changes on how you're choosing or not choosing.
So if a listener wants to take this to see how they score, how can they take this kindness quotient?
Kindness.org/KQ. And we've got 2 versions currently live, how kind you are in the workplace and how kind you are toward your neighbors.
And what's the difference?
Well, we show up differently in different environments, and we extend kindness toward people, constantly making decisions of who we want to help. This research is based on what's called welfare trade-off ratio, which is the idea that I'm willing to pay something to help others and give something of myself to help others. And I'm constantly making a decision of who do I help and why. And we adapted that so that we could understand individually we're going to show up with different dimensions of kindness. It's not the same and equal across every relationship. And that's okay. That's to be expected. When we think about measurement, we measure everything that's important. Anything we deem important, we've found a way to measure it. And so our thought is that's how important kindness is. We should figure out a way to measure it, and individuals should be thinking about how am I showing up with kindness and using that as a baseline to guide their behaviors.
Well, let me ask you something because I recently came to some realizations. I study all three Abrahamic religions. I've read the Torah, the Quran, the Bible, and looking at Jesus, I mean, his message really boils down to six words. Everything else is commentary. Love God, love yourself, love others. And I want to focus on the middle one because I think being kind and loving yourself is challenging. We typically, at least as parents, put our children first, we put ourselves last, we don't take care of ourselves, or there's earlier trauma in our life where we're unnecessarily hard to ourselves. And if you don't love yourself, you're not kind to yourself, how can you be kind to others? How do you think about that? Because most people, they hear kind and they're thinking external, not internal.
I always go to the oxygen mask first analogy when you're on an airplane. You can't help the person next to you. You can't help your child put theirs on if yours isn't on. And same thing with pouring from an empty cup. If you yourself are not fulfilled and grounded and have some sense of your own peace and self worth and self value, it's very difficult to not feel depleted if you're constantly extending toward others. And on a personal note, so much of my why is exactly what you said, which is the personal trauma I experienced and what I went through growing up. I realized I myself was trying to focus on kindness externally without really knowing what it meant for me as Jaclyn. And so a lot of our work has tended to think about the external, but we always start with who you are as the person, what your own story is, and how you can build in a healthy way, because that's how you'll be able to extend farther with your impact.
Do you mind if I push a little?
Absolutely. Yes.
No, I'd love to hear a little bit about that childhood trauma. And the reason I bring it up is that, R360, we got about 180 members. One member, Don Wenner, he just won Entrepreneur of the Year. He ran away from home at 15, grew up very poor, had problems with his mom and dad, had three jobs, lived literally in 37 homes between 15 and 21, dropped out of college, but then he created over $100 million of wealth. And later on in life, when I met him, his father's the CFO. He'd repaired all of that. And that early trauma really kind of pushed him. So, what was the trauma that you experienced that ended up bringing you into this type of work?
Well, that's an amazing story. And I think that's a reflection of what happens when we go through things, which is the resilience and what we're forced to do to survive, what we're forced to do to overcome, to be our best selves. And not everyone gets out of it. I don't want to try to throw some rose colored lens scenario where every single person who faces bad things can come out stronger and better. But I do think the things we go through are what can contribute to the strength of who we become, and to our success, however people are defining success. For me personally, I always start my story actually with my parents because I think we're all a direct reflection of where we come. We can't control those circumstances.
We get gifts from our mom and dad,
Hmm.
but we also get emotional wounds, intentional or unintentional.
Hmm.
That's
Exactly.
life.
Exactly. And outside of home, it's also all of the other details that are so important that you have no control, which is what country are you born into? Are
Yeah.
you born into a religion that's forced upon you? There's all of these external factors. So all of these things are shaping each person, the 8+ billion people around the world. My story starts with my dad, who's an immigrant, came here to pursue the American dream. That meant coming, he wanted to serve the country,
And where did he come from?
Peru.
Oh, okay.
And he met my mom. She was one of the first people he met. And he left to go to boot camp in Virginia. He was going to join the Navy. She's pregnant. He decides to do what he feels is the right thing. They get married. It wasn't a healthy marriage, but he knew he wanted to try to show up the best he could as a dad. And I credit so much of what they did for us as children. I have two sisters, so three of us total, and their emphasis on making sure we had a loving home. That gave me a foundation of self-confidence and self-worth from a very young age because they focused on success around love. Your legacy was how you showed up as a human. And that was my first 10 years. I was very ambitious. I was born very ambitious. I was very entrepreneurial. I was the little mayor of our Key West town where my dad was stationed. I thought I'd be first woman president one day. And then in middle school and onward into high school, I experienced bullying. And I have wrestled so much with this as part of my story because now we know this was, 30 years ago.
Right.
The bullying today is unlike anything because you have the anonymity, you have what's happening in social. Mine was just regular. It was some verbal, some physical, a lot of cruelty. It was quite relentless. But what happened is I didn't have the tools to know how to change the narrative that was being thrown at who I was. It was largely around being poor, what I looked like. And I started believing what was being told to me. So although I was quite confident, that all was lost over the years. And it led into depression. Didn't again have a lot of language for what I was going through at the time and was living a double life. So I was captain of soccer, president of honor society, volunteering, and was struggling deeply with really dark thoughts and, not wanting to be here. And how do you cope with that? That led to drug use at a young age, and ended up getting expelled from high school. And I overdosed at 19 through what I now know was an addiction that I had. So in the span of a decade, went from thinking I would change the world in some really important, significant way to barely making it to my 20th birthday. So that's the background of what really propelled me into doing good work, into serving in the nonprofit space, into trying to help missions have an impact. My purpose became about you're lucky to be alive. How are you going to serve this world with something that allows you to feel you're grateful that your life is still here?
And
So
how does that change the way that you parent your two children? How old are your two children?
5 and 7,
Wow. So a boy, girl, or
two boys, two
two
boys.
boys? Wow.
Yeah.
So how does that impact the way you parent?
Mm. Well, we have a lot of dialogue, very focused dialogue around creating a safe space for them to know they can always come to us, that we'd rather know everything than them worry about getting in trouble for something. We every day have questions at dinner that are around, did someone extend kindness to you? Did you see something unkind today? And we really try to create norms around this being a part of how we speak, how we treat one another. We have a lot of cadences around holiday season or different milestones throughout the year where they know we are trying to figure out how we show up as people in the world when they have seen cruelty, like kids being mean. We talk about what could be going on with them, what they might be going through. How do we have empathy for the bully?
And your kids are in what grade now?
Kindergarten and second.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm off tomorrow to go take care of my three grandkids, and mine are all out of the house. But I have three girls.
Mhm.
You were three girls and one boy. And what I always tell them, because it's kind of what my wife always tells me about myself, is that I'm a kind person. And I tell them, look, the most important thing in finding a partner is finding someone that's kind. It's hard
Mhm.
to fix kind. And in a marriage, you're going to have arguments. But if the person is kind, they're not going to do things that are destructive. It's going to be easier to get back in a good place. But I imagine that, you would say that you can develop kindness through practice like anything else, right?
Yes, yes. The research shows that kindness has about 25% based on genetics, which is quite interesting. A lot of people don't recognize that. Every human has the capacity for kindness, but just like going to the gym, it is a habit. It is a muscle that needs to be cultivated and cared for, and we can all grow it. That's actually going back to the KQ part of what that shows is that it's not stagnant. Like your IQ, usually it stays. You are what you are when it comes to your intelligence. But kindness is something that can constantly be growing within all of us as people. There's amazing stories out there, case studies that show the 180 of people even who are considered bad, um, and what is possible with them changing into good.
There's unconditional love, which one has for their spouse, their children, their family, and you should have for everyone, right? But how do you distinguish love from kindness? I mean, Jesus talks about the Good Samaritan and that was kindness, but it's also love. So how do you distinguish that?
We call kindness a meta value. So, under the umbrella of kindness, love, gratitude, fairness, justice, honesty, those are all ways that kindness shows up and can be extended and shown. But kindness is really the overarching umbrella over all of those things. Um, each of those virtues or values or expressions of feeling or emotion, they're not interchangeable. But so often, kindness can be. And so there's interesting research on loving kindness meditation that shows when you show that love towards someone and that kindness or compassion towards someone, what it can do to almost rewire how you treat them and feel about them. And so I would say love has a place, and you're going to love your kids differently than you love your colleagues. And that will be different than how you love your R360 members. But kindness is the extension or expression of that love. It's the behaviors of how that shows up externally.
And we have an R360 member who's in real estate, and he attributes his entire success to one thing that he does every morning. He smiles in the mirror, he smiles big, he practices, and he smiles all day. And he's one of those guys, when you think of CEO, I think of chief energy officer.
Mm.
Whenever you talk to him, you meet with them, even if it's on the phone, you come away with more energy. And I've seen it too. Like you can do an experiment and just get into an elevator and just smile at everyone and say good morning, good afternoon, and the whole thing changes. A smile is an act of kindness, right?
Yes, I mean, that's actually the important thing to hit on is that I think we've undermined or underappreciated or underestimated the power of these micro behaviors. But actually, what our research has shown is the smallest acts can often have the greatest impact. Not to be a little too dreary here, Charlie, but there was an interesting look at letters of suicide
Yeah.
into were there themes or patterns. And there was one where the person was going to walk to the Golden Gate Bridge. And they said, if somebody smiles at me between my apartment into the bridge, on my walk to the bridge, I won't jump. I just want one person to show me and remind me. And so inevitably he jumps. And, we don't know for sure, certain, but we're led to believe that that means no one smiled at him on the way. We just never know what someone's going through and what that one act can do to completely transform their day or their life.
You're absolutely right. It brings up a friend of mine. He passed last year, but he had set up a center with the Dalai Lama for empathy and compassion at
Mhm.
Stanford. And I had spent some time with him in Denver, and we were just walking along. And then we kind of like, where did Jim go? And he
Dr.
saw,
Doty? Are you
yeah.
talking? Oh my gosh, Dr. Doty, amazing story. I know. I didn't know you knew him. I'm sorry for
Oh, yeah. We're very good friends.
he's a man.
I did a leadership retreat at Necker Island. I took him for 5 days, but we were actually at a retreat in Denver, and we were both in the Air Force, so we had lots of stories. But it's like, where'd Jim go? Like he was just behind us. Well, he had stopped because somebody was begging on the side of the street, and all of us walked by him. Jim was going to give him $20 for food, but he wanted to go with him
Mm.
to buy the food and talk to him. So they went to, I think, a McDonald's. He bought him food, still had money left over. wished him well. And he said, look, he just wanted to be seen.
Hmm.
And he didn't want just charity. He wanted human connection and someone to treat him with respect. And of course, Jim had a way of embarrassing all of us because we all walked by, didn't even, barely notice, right? And it's too bad that he passed, and it was so sad. But I had read that book. I was with my wife at a film festival in Maine, and I went into this bookstore, and I love magic, and there was, hey, a book about magic, but it was his story, and I was so touched by it that I wrote him a letter. I didn't have his address, so he never got it. Went to his publisher, but like I'm really big in manifesting, and I was meditating. Somebody had done a meditation from the back of his book, and 3 months later, somebody in San Francisco said, "Charlie, you got to meet a friend of mine, Jim Dottie, and let me introduce you." And
Uh,
we met and became fast friends. You spent years with another friend of mine, Scott Harrison at Charity Water, helping raise over $100 million. I had met Scott when he was a $1 million nonprofit.
mm,
I encouraged him to write a book. I encouraged him to be a public speaker. He's probably one of the best speakers I've ever heard. When I was running a nonprofit, I had him come to New York. I had like 5,000 kids, and it was crazy what he did. But tell us about that experience, what you learned, and what made you walk away from that and bet everything on kindness.
Great question. And I want to just tell you, Dr. Doty was one of the first people who gave me time when I stepped away to start this. And he
Wow.
so generous. We met with him at Stanford, my co-founder and I. He stayed an early champion and supporter.
By the way,
Mhm.
this is from the Dalai Lama.
Oh my goodness, I love
And
that.
he had the partnership. I took
Yes.
my daughter to the Himalayan mountains last year on a spiritual retreat.
Wow.
And it was right around the time uh, uh, my mother passed July 12th,
Huh.
and he passed a little bit after that last year.
Yeah. Amazing man. So Scott, Charity Water. I just saw Scott last week for the first time in so many years, and yeah, it was wonderful. And everything you said is so true about him, and that's what drew me to him. So I was living in Florida and working as a fundraiser for a hospital system, and was my husband and I were eager to move to New York, and I knew if I went, there would be only one place I would want to work, with was Charity Water. I had long been following and admired him and his vision and the way he had structured the organization. So I wrote him a letter and like FedExed it to him so that he would like have to sign for it. And he emailed and he asked if we could meet. And I basically spoke to him about my passion for what he was doing and how I thought I could help him. My background in fundraising was more on ultra high net worth individuals and major donors, and so I came in early days. I joined the organization in 2012, quite a few years ago. Yeah, and I want to tell you too one amazing story about him. It was quite a intense interview process, and I had to fly up a couple times and meet with several people and executives and his wife and co-founder, and so we get to the very end, and they had me do like a pretty robust questionnaire. I submitted it, and I blind copied my dad, who was my mentor, my best friend, my biggest champion. He had like read my answers. And so I send it to Scott, blind copy my dad. I'm in the final step. And my dad replies all and is like, "Baby girl, I'm so proud of you. This is so amazing."
Oh,
And I'm like, there goes my job. Most unprofessional thing you can do. And Scott writes me right back. And he's like, "My dad would do the same thing. I'll be in touch." And so he hires me. And
wow.
yeah, that was always a funny little anecdote. And honestly, Charlie, it was the most incredible experience of my career being a part of that team and getting to work alongside of him. I learned so much. I had the humbling opportunity to travel with him and to support him in his relationships and help build out and expand the fundraising program. I had an amazing boss that came in and is still a good friend. And, it was just such a special place and special team. And so I never saw my life anything other than being there, quite honestly. But this was also at the same time that I was going through my own journey, I guess you can say, of healing, facing the music of my past.
And when did you meet your current husband in this journey?
Goodness, we met when I was 23 and got married when I was 25. So we were a few years into being married, 3 years into being married when I joined Charity Water.
Got it. Got
Yeah,
it. Okay.
yeah. And, yeah, so we moved up there, I was 20. I think I joined him when I was, like, 27 or 8 or something. So I was in intense therapy and, just learning a lot about myself, and, several people were asking me, "Is this your forever? Like, do you wanna be a fundraiser forever?" But I was going back to who I was, and it was like, no, like, I had a bigger vision for my life, I had deeper desires, like, loved fundraising.
I ran a nonprofit uh, called Tendro. It was a peer-to-peer group for nonprofit leaders. We grew it to 34 countries, 1,000 social entrepreneurs. And the reason I started R360 was because that skill set that you have is rare,
Mm,
and most nonprofit leaders don't have it themselves. So they have to hire people,
yeah,
and they typically don't have the budgets to hire the right people or go through an interview process that Scott went through to hire somebody great like you. And that's why I created R360. But you had these skills, you'd been bullied, which was trauma. And if
mhm.
you could make the world kinder, like it's just your origin story and your abilities, I can just see it so clearly now.
Thank you, Charlie. Yeah, it was, I'm gonna be honest, not easy to walk away. I thought I wanted to do something, I had a lot of ideas. Kindness came kind of at the tail end of everything. I thought maybe I'd do hospitality, and I had a whole plan around that. I got offers to come run foundations for people, be a chief of staff to somebody, like, and I just was trying really hard to surrender to God and, like, ask for guidance.
You surrendered and heard the message loud and clear.
Really did. I heard kindness. That it was so crazy. And, yeah, so I left June 2015, and one of the donors that I was working with at Charity Water, we were having my goodbye lunch, and he shared that he was also thinking about his legacy and that he felt kindness was the most important thing, and he wanted to do something with me. And what did I think about that? And so it was very serendipitous, universe working, God intervening, whatever you want to call it, bringing us together. But I didn't want to jump right in. I was trying to take time to be really thoughtful with it. So his foundation brought me in as a consultant. And I said, let's try to understand the space. Let's figure out what would we do. Truth be told, I didn't want to start a nonprofit. I knew how hard they were.
Right.
I I knew the challenges, that this would be an uphill battle for a long time. And not only that, Charlie, at the time, 10 years ago, Dr. Doty being included in this, every researcher I met with would say the same thing. This is the most important thing we have for humanity: empathy, compassion, love, kindness. If we don't have that, we have nothing. But we're not applying it. Like, we can show you the studies and the evidence and we do the research, but we're not figuring out, what does it mean for policy? What does it mean for interventions within school systems? And that's where we saw the gap. My co-founder and I very quickly realized no one was doing applied sciences. No one was doing the knowledge translation. And the final thing I'll say is that when I said yes to this with Neil, it was the only thing that scared me. And I could keep fundraising. The thing that intimidated me was I was trying to figure out how to build a movement around a virtue, which many people thought was stupid, soft, fluffy, not as important as the water crisis. So I faced a lot of skepticism, let's say.
Well, imagine many, many years ago, there was a marginal Jew called Jesus, and he wanted to start a movement around one word: love.
Yes, I
You
love that.
know,
Yes, yes.
didn't go well for him, but he started quite a movement,
Yes, you did.
and he had a mission, and he cried, and well, he cried when he went to see Lazarus, but I think he cried because he knew that That was the start to the walk to the cross. But, tell me the difference between being nice
Mm,
and being kind, because you've said publicly that those are not the same thing.
they're not, no. Um, my easiest illustration that everyone loves and remembers, and so I always go back to it, is nice is not telling someone when they have food in their teeth, and kind is telling someone when they have food in their teeth. Digging deeper, what do I mean? Niceness doesn't take courage. It's about a politeness, being courteous. Kindness is a depth. It is courageous sometimes. It's bravery. It's a willingness to see someone and do something about it. What you said about, the person who's homeless that Dr. Doty took to get food, we did research on the homeless, and what we found is that they look for dignity. Just look me in the eye when you walk by me. More than the dollar, they care that you see them as a human being. And so that is what kindness is illustrating. It's the side that's a little uncomfortable for us, right? It's easier to just ignore that we're walking by because we don't want to face our own issues, that we don't want to help them, or we don't want to take time to see them. But that's what kindness is. It's the willingness to pay that cost or take that energy of yourself. And so that would be the easiest way that I would distinguish between those two.
I want to ask you, the world feels meaner than it ever has been. Social media, politics. I have a Substack. You should see the comment section. Are you optimistic that, this is fixable, or are we basically fighting a forest fire with a garden hose?
Hmm. Great question. I'm always optimistic. I have to be to keep doing this work, and I have enough proof points and case studies that remind me of the power of what can happen. There's an example on an extremist level that I'll share as an illustration of this, which is there's a story of a former American veteran who was going into a mosque with a gun with an intention to shoot the attendees, and the leader of the mosque knew in that moment, I I have a lot of ways I can show up, and I'm going to show up with love, and held their arms open, and they end up hugging. And whatever reason, the veteran was willing to hug this leader of the mosque. And it was this one moment, Charlie, of like, what am I going to do? And I'm going to try to show love to this man who's clearly broken and lost and full of, hate and evil and whatever you want to call it. They now go on the speaker circuit. They're now friends, and they talk about this one single act of what can happen when you show love toward the other side, toward whatever the other side may be to you. And I have endless examples of these things. And so that's the power and the ripple of that. What has now changed from their stories being spoken out and people hearing it, and that to me is the reminder we need. And we don't want to see the good all the time. We're of course wired toward the bad. We just know that as humans. If 10 great things happen in a day and one bad happens, you're going to complain about the bad thing at dinner that night, usually. So it's reminding people, yes, it is fixable, but it's the collective effort. Every single day you're faced with choices. Every day we're all faced with endless choices of how we're showing up. So you have the capacity and ability to transform those around you with your behaviors and what you're willing to do.
I agree. It's also hard to hate someone that you're sitting next to having a conversation. And I think God really has a sense of humor, because I believe he gave everybody divinity, but then he created 10,000 religions and 10,000 languages.
Mhm.
I get this question: if you could wave a magic wand and just do one thing, what would you do? And I would say I'd have one language.
Mm,
Everybody can talk to each other. Everybody can understand. You know, Israel's 23% Arab. Most people don't realize that, but most Israelis don't speak Arabic, and most
mm,
Arabs don't speak Hebrew. And it's like, hey, if you can't even converse, and I just opened a Substack about 5 months ago or 4 months ago, and some of the people that have come at me hot, like really hot, I respond respectfully but forcefully. Then they come back again and again and
mm,
again
mhm.
and again, and now we're friends. They're my biggest supporters, and I think that on Sunday I started something called Dear Charlie, which is all the the commentary back and forth, the ones that make me laugh, the funnest ones, and people get more sometimes from just reading the comments and the arguments than and we've lost that in America. I was once on a show on CNN called Crossfire, and I thought it was the favorite show. You had somebody from the right, somebody from the left, two guests, and you'd hear one side and go, yeah, yeah, I agree with that. And then you hear the other and go, well, huh, it's a
Yes.
little more complicated. But by the end of the show, you left intelligent about the issue. That doesn't exist anymore. It's like my way or the highway. And if you don't believe what I believe, you're a fascist.
Mhm.
There's no communication anymore.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. You're hitting on something I think is important, which, one, would love us to all speak the same language. And since we don't, we will say kindness is a universal language. You don't need words to show actions of love and kindness toward others. But in these environments that we're finding ourselves in, it's so important to come together with common ground and to try to understand what it means to have difficult conversations that are still built on respect, not needing to be right, but being respectful. Let me plant a seed, Charlie, that one of our donors is doing an event at the Capitol building in April to screen one of his films called A Case for Kindness and facilitate a dialogue around Republicans versus Democrats in the country right
Right.
now. I would love to extend an invite to you and whoever else you think might resonate with this, because that is the work that has to happen. We have to create opportunities where we're showing what it means to bring people together from different perspectives and show that we're human first. We're human first, and we have more alike than different. We're like 99% the same. Our differences are like less than 1%, but we always focus on that as the thing to separate us. And I think that's where we need to change the conversation.
I remember working for Ronald Reagan and my first president. I worked with six now, and he would invite Tip O'Neill to play poker once a week, and and drink bourbon. And 4 months went by, and Tip O'Neill looked to Reagan and said, "Mr. President, I just want to let you know that in 4 months I've seen you more in the White House than I saw the other president, Jimmy Carter, in 4 years." And then Reagan turned around and said, Tip, you and I disagree about 80% of everything. Why don't we figure out the 20% we do agree on and start working on that?
Mm.
And that's how they developed a great relationship. One of the guests I've had is called Greg Witz, and he's South African, grew up in Canada, and now he and his wife and two kids live in Costa Rica. And he's all about making better humans. He's a master in communication. His father was friends. There's a Canadian MD that wrote a book called Games People Play. And it's amazing because it basically says that we're a combination of critical parent, angry child. We can be an adult. We can be a withdrawn child. We can be a spontaneous child, or we could be a parent that's all about empathy and protectiveness. And like you said, at work, you might show up as a critical parent, but as a parent, you may show up, differently.
Mhm.
And the one thing is to get to the frontal lobe, you have to ask a question.
Mm.
And if you do something that's not kind,
Mhm.
and I respond from my ego as an angry child, you're going to become either withdrawn or you're going to become an angry child. I hired him as a coach, and it's so interesting when you have a problem with someone. And I have one of these conversations later on today with someone that's hurt because of something that happened
Mm.
with someone else, and I'm coming to intervene. And it's really, these are the facts,
Yeah.
no bias. These are the facts. These are the way that these facts made you feel. Your judgment is da 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 da. And your role in it maybe was this, and what you would like is X, Y, and Z. No defensiveness. And it's incredible when you use that approach and people feel heard, like everything goes
Yeah.
down. It's like, yeah, and it's like, is there anything else? Like, oh yeah, there's a couple more things that you left out.
Hmm.
And then again, okay, so let me get this straight. What I left out, these are the facts. These are the emotions that those created. Your judgment is this. And what you would like is this. Is there anything else? No. Are we clear? Great. So I'm going to have that conversation with someone and be very kind. I've been married now. This will be my 20th year of marriage. And so many times you get like defensive. And instead of listening, acknowledging, validating, you start making excuses and you just keep digging the hole deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. I'm like, why don't they teach this stuff in elementary school and middle school and high school?
Great question. That, yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's another big area that kindness.org is focusing on is the education space and what children are learning from their earliest years. And I think you hit on the idea of asking a question, curiosity. It's one of our org values.
Yeah. Same R360.
Yeah.
Curiosity is one of our big values.
Oh, amazing. Same. So I really try to make sure I come out that we don't have a monopoly on this. We're coming with questions and we're doing our best to show up and we're always evolving and adapting, but it's about asking those questions. And when we were looking at children, exactly to your point, what are they learning? How are we equipping them? We evaluated the space. This kind of work is couched under what's called social emotional learning. There's endless programs and resources out there to teach this. But we asked educators and caregivers and principals, are there any gaps? What are you struggling with? And so many of the SEL programs are prescriptive. You're telling a 5-year-old to be kind, but that is not, I mean, you're a dad of 4, my kids are in this age right now, like, I can't just say, "Be kind," right? So, what we did to overcome the barriers is really flip the script on how children are learning by turning them into student scientists of kindness, and they are built around question and curiosity and the intrinsic sense as kids that they wanna understand and learn by being immersed, and it has been unbelievable to see the impact in just 5 years since we launched this curriculum out into the world of what's happening by teaching kids, ask questions, study kindness, learn that it's different for all of us, and nested under it, Charlie, they're learning empathy and compassion. They're learning about mental health. They're learning about conflict resolution, leadership, their choices and impact out in the world. And that's the real power, I think, of where we need to really invest is the future of leaders and how kids are being raised. And I think to your earlier question, that's how it's fixable. If we don't just focus on math and language arts, but we really are focusing on the future of how we're raising civil citizens of the world who know how to show up in a leadership capacity and who know how to contribute to the world, balancing these things of being curious and being a good listener and being kind. That to me is where long term transformation happens globally.
No, I agree. And I've written 2 books on leadership. They're in 15 languages. I've spent much of my life teaching leadership. And you mentioned a couple things that I think are key. Curiosity and having an open mind. First of all, in the military, I jumped out of planes of all kinds, halo jumps, high altitude. And I always told my kids and tell people that your mind is like a parachute. It only works if it's open.
Mm-hmm.
That's number one. Number two, you mentioned the word scientist. I'm an engineer, went to the Air Force Academy, but I consider myself a scientist. So I think in hypothesis. So many things that I believed 20 years ago or 30 years ago have been proved false. And it happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd rather put something out there and say, look, my hypothesis is X. It's
Mm-hmm.
based on these assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I believe. If somebody comes with different facts, that changes my assumption, then I will change my hypothesis. That's what science is all about. One of the best scientific books of all time was written by Thomas Kuhn, who coined the term paradigm shift. And what happens is scientists come out with some theory, they become very famous, and then they spend the rest of their life not being open, but defending their. Now, it's different than values. Kindness, curiosity are a value.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's a conflict, you're going to look at your values and make those decisions. But I think that if somebody wants to be successful in life, they need to think like a scientist. And then the last thing I would say is I've done a lot of studies on the number one skill of a leader is self awareness.
Hmm.
We're all built different. There's 17 main patterns and a whole bunch of other ones. And we often marry our opposite. So my superpower could drive my spouse nuts
Yeah.
and vice versa, which a lot of the best decisions are made together. Or if you have to do a task, but your partner has a superpower on that task, you let them do it, even though
Yeah.
it's not like the way that society may think spouses should behave.
Mhm.
And then the second most important quality of a leader is empathy.
Mm.
And empathy to know that if you have 4 children, their personalities are totally different.
Yeah.
It's weird how that happens. And then if you want to, as a parent, to maximize their full potential, which is all I want my children, is to discover their purpose, what are their gifts, use their gifts for the benefit of others, and achieve their full potential, you got to come at them differently. My son's an introvert. My oldest daughters, or all my daughters, are extroverts.
Mhm.
So how I come at him is totally different,
Yeah. Yeah.
and in school, when you're trying to teach kindness, obviously it's a whole different ballgame because of where people come from,
Yep.
all of those things. Tell me about what's the most counterintuitive thing that science has shown you, something where you've said, wow, I would have never guessed that about kindness.
Oh, we have a lot of research. This year we'll publish our 10th research paper. As you know, research takes a long time and we care about not just it being publishable, but citable. So is it actually contributing to the scientific field? I believed so deeply in what kindness could do and the power of it, but I'll never forget someone else published this paper. We did research on the link to well-being. So it was a meta-analysis. We did a systematic literature review on 27 papers, and that now is the gold standard paper on kindness and well-being when it comes to contributing to others. And out of that, another research paper emerged, which showed a kind act is the most effective way to improve the well-being of two people. It's like a two for one. And it's the most effective way to raise societal communal well-being. And I believed in it. And then all of a sudden I saw this is newer research from the past few years. So when we talk about mental health, when we talk about well-being, we started finding that we're a resource, for example, on crisis text line. So when people are calling, crisis text line because of suicidal thoughts or dark thoughts, they send them to kindness.org. Go do a kind act for somebody. Because literally, that is one of the quickest ways in that moment to help someone get out from what they're facing and what they're going through is to go help somebody. I would say that as a encouragement to people that there's real power in what it's actually contributing to. It isn't just a nice to have. It isn't just a soft thing. It's something that's actually the most effective way that, as far as what we know now, to your point of evidence being able to change. But today, all evidence points to this being something that has, like critical mass around, like if we could get people to do this at scale, what it could do for the mental health epidemic. And so that was quite surprising to me.
You're raising 2 boys right now, and you mentioned it briefly, but we have a lot of parents that listen to this. So how do you actually teach kindness at home? Is there a method, or are parents mostly just winging it, or what do you do? You're the expert. So help other parents listening on things that they can do with their kids.
Yeah. So one, first and foremost, you said it just a moment ago, your kids are going to be different. We know that, but genuinely how kind they are and their capacity for kindness is very different. So with your 4 kids, I'm assuming you saw varying levels of natural kindness. Like some of them just naturally more empathetic, naturally more willing to be a helper. So my 2 boys, 5 and 7, my younger one is just the naturally sensitive, empathetic, kind helper. He is like, he has a hardwiring to want to serve, to want to love you, to want to hug you. And my older one is more reserved, not so interested in that. It can be hard for him to want to do that. And so I think it's always remembering you're raising different people. We know this and it's obvious, but it's important to know that means how you're teaching kindness is going to be different because it's more natural for some than others. Um, the main thing we try to focus on is awareness of action. So every day, it's like you're getting out of the car to go to school and you're responsible for your choices. You have agency of choice. And so little reminders like you get to choose how you're going to show up. And that I cannot emphasize enough giving kids that reminder of choice and agency with their behaviors. So we really have tried to instill it. What is it? It's like it takes 10,000 times to do something before you can be considered an expert or something. So just reinforcement, behavioral reinforcement, verbal reinforcement. And then as far as little activities that we've seen that are quite successful, we have a kindness jar, and we use it for two things. When we see kind behaviors, we celebrate that and we point it out and we say, hey, I want you to know like what you just did, that is what kindness is. And sometimes now they'll come and be like, oh, this happened. Like, can I put it in the kindness jar? So it's an awareness around being reflective with that. And then what's an act we can pull out and commit to do that day? So those kinds of little exercises really help create an environment where kindness is expected, not just something we try, but like we're expected to show up with this. And again, self-awareness. I love that that's the first leadership trait. It's from the earliest days. Like our most formative years in childhood development is up until we're 8. So we need to be investing at those early years to really be shaping how do we strengthen self-awareness? How do we give kids the tools to embrace these kinds of behaviors? And then dialogue. We talk about it every day. And sometimes they don't want to, but it's reminding them this is how important it is. I don't care about the grade. Yeah, you're 5 and 7. I'm not interested in the homework. It's like I'm interested in what did you learn that showed you how to show up as a good human today? How did you, and you're not always going to. So how did
Right.
you face the adversity? What happened when someone said something cruel? How am I giving you the tools to be equipped? And then any parents, if you go to our website, kindness.org, we have a huge hub of incredible resources for all of this. We have everything and anything you can imagine that you can bring into your home. We have a guide we created with Highlights for Children magazine called Guide to Difficult Conversations. To exactly your point, to give kids the tools to know you're going to have kids that think differently than you, but how are you equipped to go in with curiosity, finding common ground? If we can start all of these things again at the earliest ages, that's where, long-term change can happen around the world. Does that help?
That definitely helps. And the other thing that you mentioned, and I'm connected to some of the top longevity docs
Mm.
around the world, and they'll all tell you that about 15 to 20% of longevity is genetic. And you mentioned that some people are just wired to be kinder, but you also said it's a skill that, like a muscle, that you can grow it. Is there any behavioral like test or stuff? Like a lot of the behavioral tests that we've developed or that I am certified in, you have to be like 15 years old. Is there something that you can use that's scientifically valid for kids that shows you that kind of kindness genetic?
Not to date anything that I know of from what
Yeah.
we've seen, and it does come down to age and privacy, and we have do one of the largest studies on children. This was in partnership with ESPN grant to study how kids understand kindness. Our hypothesis is that so much of what's being put out is made by adults for kids. But if kids aren't actually weighing in on what they need and what kindness is, there could be a mismatch. So we did one of the largest studies ever with youth. We did it through, I want to say ages 11 to 17. Please don't quote me on those ages, but basically middle school and high school.
Right.
And it was asking kids, what are the kindest things you would want your peers to do? Because if we're guiding you toward these sets of behaviors, but that's actually not what kids need, then how are we equipping kids with what's most valuable? And so it's called Kid Kind Base. It's a database of kind acts rated by children. And then we
Wow.
have adults do it. And there was a mismatch. Adults thought these sets of acts were the most important, and kids are coming in saying, nope, this is what actually matters to me in middle school. And so we can now use that, and we have used that to guide. And you can find this on our website to guide you with resources on, hey, have your kid focus on these kinds of acts of kindness because this is actually what kids need most right now.
You told us you've taken this into the workplace and schools. Where is it harder to move the needle? A corporation with quarterly earnings pressure or a middle school full of 13-year-old kids?
Great question. Honestly, the harder part has been corporate. So we with our school program, it's called Learn Kind, with zero marketing, completely organic and word of mouth. We have surpassed 500,000 students reached. We're in 50 states.
Wow.
We're in 80 countries, and we did a randomized control trial to evaluate the efficacy, and we saw academic performance improve. We saw teacher mental health improve. Of course, we saw an incredible increase in kindness and pro-social behaviors. So we're incredibly proud of what Learn Kind is achieving in the classroom setting. We had many stories come in from eighth grade teachers of boys saying, let me tell you why this is changing, how they're understanding kindness, because you're not coming in at them with prescription of it.
Right.
And so the very first thing we do, we don't give the kids a definition. We let them know it's personal to you. Here's what the science says. And so they go through the first, framework around the science of kindness, and eighth grade boys are saying, oh, it's heroic to be kind. It's like it's brave to be kind. So they're completely taking it from like, oh, kindness is weak, soft, like it's for girls, whatever their narrative of kindness is. And now they have real evidence that says, no, it's hard to stand up when you need to do something for justice, or that person's being bullied and you go to defend them. And so that reframing has been remarkable, and we've seen incredible traction. The corporate side, what's interesting, Charlie, is we get so much inbound from corporates coming to us saying we need help. Low morale, lack of employee engagement, retention challenges, leadership barriers. Like we have, you can imagine, and it's almost always someone from HR, a passionate employee who's like, I love my company, but like
Right.
something's not working. And every so often, someone in the C suite. And, we have this on our website. Some of these companies have included Verizon and Google. And, we've had people come to us that are from quite large and substantial brands and companies. But when push comes to shove, trying to do a company-wide focus on kindness is so difficult. Even when we have all the data to show why it's good for bottom line, it's good for shareholders. We did a study that looked at kindness and the importance to employees. We focused on 6 companies in the United States, all different sectors, so that we could show diversification, that this wasn't one kind of company. I was featured on Bloomberg talking about this study because unanimously the employees said we care more about how kindly we're treated than what we're being paid, what our income is. So as
Wow.
as a leader, you're thinking, look, this matters. Like the people have spoken.
Big time. And of course, you're ringing the bell on the NASDAQ closing,
Yes.
and tell us
Yes.
about the, like, I didn't know there was a kindness week. Like, how long has there been a kindness week?
Started in the 90s. It was
Okay.
initiated by a wonderful group out in Asia. And then it became kind of unofficially this week that now officially is embraced by the world. You can like Google it. There's like a history in Wikipedia about
Right.
it. And my thing is that every day should be Kindness Day, but we use that week, World Kindness Week, which is, it always falls in November, around November 10th to 14th. And World Kindness Day falls on November 13th. So it falls within the whole week. And it's just a moment in time where people can really embrace and focus on the message of kindness across media and culture. There tends to be a huge uptick in school adoption using our programs, or people, online wanting to engage with it in some way. So that's World Kindness Week.
What is the one thing that you wish people would just stop doing because they think it's kind, but it's actually not helping anyone?
Wow, that's an excellent question. Thinking you know what's best. I think with good intentions, people can do things thinking, oh, I know best, so I'm going to do something. But it goes back to being curious. The idea of the golden rule, like, I'm going to treat you how I want to be treated. But what if that person wants to be treated differently? So by making this assumption that, like, oh, I know how to show up, I'm going to do this for me. So I actually try to challenge the golden rule and how we've learned
It's
it.
like love languages, like your love language and mine can be totally different.
Yeah,
So I
exactly.
feel love like this and my
Yeah.
wife very differently. So
Exactly. Yep. So I would say it would be connected to that. Like, you might have a good intention, but um you might not know. You might not know what's best.
my hypothesis is that social media platforms
Mm.
make billions and billions off outrage and conflict, and they've essentially declared war on everything you're trying to build. What do you think of my hypothesis?
You're right to an extent. I think that there's a lot of issues with social media. Um we're more connected than ever, but more divided. And I think it has a very big role in perpetuating that. I will say, just in a way to play devil's advocate with this, um, when we've looked at the science, like, what there's not a lot out there yet. There's been some evidence, and I can share some of the papers. We did a big study on the role of influencers and if they're putting out good content or not, what that does for followers. We tend to lean in to the negative, and then miss all the good that's happening. So, for example, social media has allowed fundraising for people and individuals in need in a way that we have, in an unprecedented way that we've never experienced. Like, people's lives forever changed because of mobilization of how social media is being used. There's these examples. So how do you weigh that out? I think it's difficult to really say, is it all bad, when we know there's so much good happening? But again, tend to see the bad.
It's not that we tend, it's that the profit, if you look at newspapers, and there's been 100-year studies, newspapers make more money
Yep.
when they're talking about violence. If
Mhm.
there's a war, CNN is stuck to the
Yep.
the television. That they don't make money showing good works and good things. So that's a typical media platform. So now
Mhm.
you have a social media platform who now has algorithms and AI to just keep feeding you stuff. And then when I get attacked by someone, let's say on Substack or X, it's like some anonymous bot. You can find out exactly who I am and my reputation's on the line. But if a lot of people have like 10X accounts,
Mhm.
men,
Mhm.
women, different people, if they don't like something, they're not coming at you and that no one wants to, oh, they're going to out me and I work at this company at this high
Yeah.
level. I'm going to go through this anonymous female bot
Right.
and say horrendous things and no one can track it back to me.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. You're right. I think that there's a lot of problems with the social media companies. So I think you're hitting on one tenet of it. I think it's big and complex. Personally, I think AI and the future of that, like, I have graver concerns about how we're thinking about ethics and morality and
Yeah.
kindness around where the future of all that's going and who's in the driver's seat making these decisions.
Barry Weiss left, the New York Times because of what was going there. She went to Substack and she built Free Press, this incredible platform that was bought for 150 million. And I've been on there for 5 months. I also write for Market Watch and people read every word, they comment, they engage. And I think there's like this lack of trust
Yeah.
in the media that people are gravitating. There's 40 million people and growing on Substack. Maybe 3% of those are creators, but people can find their tribe and
Mhm.
have these real discussions. Substack is where LinkedIn was maybe
Mm.
10, 12 years ago. And eventually you're going to have this independent platform, Substack and others, where you'll be able to follow people that you trust that are giving you This is my hypothesis. These are my assumptions. These are things that maybe I'm not thinking about. This is what could go wrong. And you make your own conclusions. And then you have people reading who are commenting and deepening your understanding, and everybody's reading it. It also gives me hope that things are going to get better because even if you look at religion, I've written a lot about how kids in England and the US are giving up social media, going back to church, they're looking for purpose, they're tired of all the fighting and I think if you look at the smartphone kind of went vertical in 2012 at the same time anxiety, depression, ADHD, all these things. And many of the PhDs that work for these social media companies have now left and have written books about how the dopamine hit of touching a phone 3,000 times a day, Instagram and all these things with kids is rewiring their brains. And, there's a lot of bullying on social media. Is there a dark side to kindness? Can it be weaponized or faked so well that it becomes manipulation?
Yes. Yes, I think so. I mean, it's something where you think about intention. This is where I think the work of the Dalai Lama and the work that Dr. Doty focused on, and what he and I would speak about in the early days of building this, which is I see again, going back to the question of love, kindness is the action or the behavior in response to what you're feeling. So when you have empathy, that is a beautiful thing that you've like cultivated and grown that and you feel that and you can recognize I have empathy for someone right now. But if you don't act on the empathy, the person's not receiving the benefit of that empathy. So again, going back to like kids and what we're teaching, it's about the action and the behavior and the choice. However, we had to make a distinction. Are we trying to change the intention of people? Because at the end of the day, kindness can be seen as selfish. You're going to feel good when you're kind. It's going to improve your well-being. It's going to make you happier that day. It's going to change your day by being kind. And so I'm not trying to be the kindness police. Like if someone's doing this because they're struggling and this is going to help their well-being and they're holding doors open for someone, we had a student come to us that was being bullied and was lonely, and we worked with him and he used one of our toolkits to create a kindness wall at his school. Um, and he's like, I just need to feel good. Like, and so he used the wall for his own needs. It was selfish, arguably, if you look at the definition, it was for him, not to like serve others. But then all of these people came to his kindness wall and they hugged him and they wrote notes.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, not only did he feel good, but then they felt good. And now he has friends and a friend group. Where it gets dangerous, the dark side, is if you're using kindness to weaponize it by saying, I'm going to let you in and I'm going to pull you in, but it's to do harm. And so I'm being kind uh, to ultimately go to an extreme level because I want to do bad. And I think the best illustration of this, one of the scientists we worked with, worked in the Middle East on terrorism. And he was trying to research the role of connection in extremist behavior. And I'd be curious your own experience, being on the field with this, but what he discovered is that yes, we've got bad apples, there's evil people, we know that, but most people want to be good most of the time. And the terrorists were targeting lonely, mostly kids, teenagers, to pull them into their cells and to pull them into extreme terrorist behaviors. And so they were targeting kids through gaming. They were going to kids, and these kids were lonely, isolated. They didn't have friends. They didn't have a healthy home. They didn't have the mental health tools to care for themselves. And they were kind to them, kind. They welcomed them in. They said, you have a family. You'll be safe with us. We'll protect you. Come be with our group. So I think that is the dark side. And my challenge on the other is like, imagine if true kind people had reached out and said, come be with us. We'll care
Right.
for you. And so that is what happens when you get to someone who is lonely or in a dark place and where they can be pulled both to an extremist level, or to a pro-social and kind level. Do you feel like you saw any of that in your work?
There's
Very.
a guy, Robert Cialdini is the most quoted psychologist of all time. He wrote a book called Persuasion. One of the most powerful things is called the law of reciprocity. In the
Mm,
1970s, you had a group, and you didn't have all the stuff that we have now at airports, the Hare Krishna, they would give you a rose. You'd
mm,
take the rose, and it was an act of kindness. I mean, a beautiful rose. And then they would ask for, a small contribution, and they raised more money than any organization. And then there was a garbage can down the hallway, and they would go and everybody would just throw the rose away before getting on a plane, and they'd collect them and give them away again. And what you just said, it's that law of reciprocity about being kind. But I'm writing a novel now, it's done. It just came back from 50 beta readers, and it's how boys in high school, and this is being done by Russian hackers, um, they find boys that have no father figure. They've been bullied. They suffer from anxiety or depression. They
mhm,
watch at least 40 hours of violent video games, and they incite them to become a school shooter. The
mm.
first school is a Christian school where the president's only daughter goes to school. And they're using AI to identify these kids. So if you reach out to one of them in
Yeah.
a private chat in one of those chat rooms and you're kind to them, you could easily incite them in a negative way.
Mm,
And, what happens to a kid who grows up in a household with zero kindness?
mhm.
Is that damage permanent, or going through your programs at school, can that be turned around? And I have a hypothesis that a lot of bullies come from those households, you know?
Yes, I have hope. Again, I'm pragmatic as best I can be, but I have to do this work with a belief that change can happen. And I do have hope that regardless of your home life, you can change. I think it's a never ending journey with this. A gentleman I interviewed on my podcast, Ernesto Rodriguez, I'll share his story with you, Charlie. Grew up in a gang, and that's gangs is another example where
Sure.
it's like you're safe, it's your family unit, this gang, they're gonna always protect you, but you're inciting violence, you're taught from the
Yeah.
earliest ages. So grew up in a gang, unbelievable life story, ends up in prison for horrible violence, but when he's in prison, he has one act happen of someone showing him kindness that literally in that moment changed his belief in what was possible. He gets put in solitary confinement. He starts creating a kindness meditation for prisoners as a way for an outlet of healing, a belief that this can change us. Like we can change. Ends up impacting the whole group of prisoners that he's working alongside of, goes to school, gets trained in meditation, gets his not PhD, his master's, and now has built a prison curriculum and got
Wow.
released for good behavior and goes out to talk to prisoners. It's not too late. And I think that's the hope we have to have is that you just never know what can happen. And I believe 180s are possible. And that's why I never want to give up on any human believing that they can turn their powers from bad to good.
And yeah, and I remember, we talk about Jim Dottie a lot, but what he always said that struck me was that in order to turn a human's life around, there has to be one person, one that shows them unconditional love. If you have
Yeah.
one person in your life, it can be anybody, a mentor, a stranger. What happened to him walking into a magic shop in 1968, and a woman who was older showing him kindness
Mhm.
literally changed his life.
Yep.
Um, but you mentioned that loneliness is an epidemic right now. Is kindness one of the actual cures, or is that too simple?
Absolutely not. It is. It's an antidote. The Surgeon General spoke about this when he came out speaking about loneliness as an epidemic in our country. If you have one connection, one relationship, one person checking in on you, that is the bridge to healing. That is the bridge to overcome the loneliness that one can feel. And I, in no way, I want anyone to hear me because I never want it to seem like I'm simplifying the complexity of mental health journeys. My own husband has been on an incredibly intense journey with his mental health, battling loneliness and depression. So I've had a front row seat to watching and I love more than anything, and what he's had to endure and navigate through that. But it's so important to recognize that when we think of overcoming it, kindness truly is one of the leading, if not the most important antidote to it. And with longevity, you spoke about 20% being genetics. A lot of the longevity people that I follow, and I don't know who's on your radar, like Peter Attia is someone I really admire in the work
Yeah.
he's doing. But another emphasis is on our relationships and the role of human connection to extend life. And the largest study done, I think, was Harvard, looking at people and aging. It was done with only men because it was launched in the 50s, I believe, 60s maybe. So they only had male participants. But connection and human relationship and connections was the leading thing, I believe, in that study of how they aged. So I just think, yes, it truly is a solution to the epidemic.
And you mentioned your husband, growing up with trauma, and I can relate because my wife was kidnapped in South America, and it was a horrible experience. She went through 3 years of weekly therapy just to, like, be able to, function. So it's, not easy,
Yeah.
and it's a lot of work. Fortunately, she's one of those people that works on herself and has been able to, overcome most of that, but still I've had to develop tons of empathy over certain behaviors because, hey, I I haven't
Yeah.
lost everything. I haven't, gone through that experience. It's tough because people have certain triggers
Hmm.
and so how to navigate those things. 10 years from now,
Hmm.
what does success look like for kindness.org, and what's the world you're actually trying to build?
10 years from now, kindness is a UN sustainable development goal. Kindness is a required curriculum in classrooms alongside math, language arts. It is a core requirement. It's not a nice to have. We've overhauled policy within the education landscape, making it something that is just a standard of what we're teaching in the earliest of years. I want to have 100 million. We call our members doing our work kind makers. So I want to mobilize 100 million people. When I think about scale and the ripple effect,
Right.
when you start to look at what one person being involved every single day, what their behaviors can do. So having a network of 100 million people around the world participating in the work we're trying to do. I want kindness to be a corporate metric. So the same way you see like a stamp of approval, I'd love our K to validating that a corporate is contributing to a better, more humane world. And here's how we're measuring that, and they get that stamp of approval toward those commitments. And then other metrics and KPIs, like there's a variety of things that we're looking at, but it is around things like social media and the way that we're looking at the impact of things like kind content, kind behaviors, and how that's shifting the narrative and doing more longitudinal studies on that. So those would be a few ways that I would feel really happy about where kindness is going. I think a tipping point, it's provocative, but I had for so long when I would open my presentations, I would start with the question, do you believe kindness could stop a war? And create a conversation with people around how big are we talking? How powerful is this idea of kindness? And and that's what I think about. The truth is, this work is so difficult to know just how far of an impact it's having. So, those are the things I can tangibly say. I want to overhaul policy. I want this to become a priority for how we think about, human progress when it comes to like putting it on the sustainable development goals. But there's going to be endless things that I will never know how this work influenced.
So, second to the last question is there a question that I didn't ask you that I wish
Mm.
you wish I would have asked you? What would that be, and what would your answer be?
I'll tell you, I have never been interviewed. Truly, I don't think ever been interviewed and not been asked, how do you define kindness? And I'm realizing I don't think we officially defined
No,
it. Um, so what I'll say is kindness is deeply personal. It's understood by everyone. Every human has their own idea of it. So there is not a singular definition. There actually is no universal definition. Um,
interesting.
I know. So we as an organization we have our definition, and this is how we, create all of our programs and think about how our work shows up and how we measure impact. So we say the ABCs of kindness. It's always an action. It's always intended to benefit, and it's typically at a cost. This is something that I encourage people to really think about. What are their behaviors? Is it helping the other person? What's the benefit? Is it helping you? What cost are you willing to incur to do that kindness? Even if it's just a moment of your time to smile, or a moment of your time to say hello or good morning, it's worth it. So
Yeah, the biggest I just brings to mind my mother, who I love and adore. She lost her second husband. He passed from cancer, and she was alone here in Daytona. And I moved here with my wife to take care of her for the last almost 2 years of her life, and saw her every day, and it was a blessing. But also, she probably went to the emergency room a dozen times, but thank God, she died in her sleep. I was going to go see her in the morning. I would typically write my novel there and read pieces of it to her, but we got a call at 6 in the morning that she had passed in her sleep. But I was the only sibling that could do it. And that had a cost, a big cost. And I didn't want to travel a lot. I wanted to be with her. But,
yeah.
I have 3 daughters, so maybe one of them will take care of her ancient old man one of these days. Now, you have your own podcast. So my last question is there anything you want to ask me? Put me on the spot.
Yeah, you've interviewed a lot of people. Your life to me, it's such an inspiration of all the different ways that you've served, both military, presidents, your background is amazing. And I'm curious, what would you say you've seen of all the people you've worked alongside of when it comes to what the most important thing is for legacy?
For legacy, the most important thing, and it's counterintuitive, when my mom passed, I actually did this for myself. I created a document for my family. It is not a list of accomplishments. It's 10 pages, and it is, how did I make you feel, and what impact did I have in your life?
Mm.
That's it. That's all. They're not going to remember I worked with 6 presidents or three-time entrepreneur of the year or blah, 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 blah. No one remembers that. My children, my wife, my brothers, my sisters, my nieces, my nephews, my friends, my colleagues professionally are going to remember how did I make them feel? And I created and I shared it with my wife, my kids, my mom. She was alive, and they had edits, and they're like, no, you know. And now I read that once a week because I want to manifest it. I wrote my mom's obituary, and it was difficult, and then my brother passed in January, so I had to write his. So now I've written my own because I don't want my kids to go through that, and I'm going to update it every year. But it's also focused on how did I make people feel and what was my impact in the world. So R360 is just one sentence. I founded R360, whose purpose is to touch 3 billion people on a planet, to heal our planet, and to be a role model for other families of wealth. That's, like one sentence in 10 pages. So I think, when you talk about legacy, people forget it's about how you make people feel. And that's kindness. That's unconditional love. That is, and what impact did you actually have in their lives, right? So I have not been as close to my two nephews that my brother just passed. He has an 18 and a 21-year-old, and now, like, what would my younger brother expect of me?
Mm. Mhm.
It's a role that I have to step into because I know I could have an impact, and I can help them feel like they're not alone, right? So for me, it's like, how do you do that? And then when you're a family of wealth and R360, it's not only what you want, because you may
Mhm.
be passionate about certain things. Your spouse may be passionate about others. Your kids could be all over the place. And you
Mm.
have to
Yeah.
you have to be open to the things that they're passionate about. You're
Mhm.
passionate about kindness because it ties to your own personal story and your origin story. You have to be open. I have my own origin story, and that's why I like to women empowerment, veterans, education. But my kids are different. And my wife worked in prison. She worked with feeding the homeless. She's like devoted to Mother Teresa, and she gets energy from helping others. It's very, very different than mine, but they're both completely valid. Right. And then developing that muscle in children when they're younger. How do you do that? And then how do you do it so that the children like each other? And when they're in their 40s, they're still close and they're not living the drama of when they were teenagers.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I'll have to see if there's an interview somewhere, but that's my answer. If anyone ever asks, what's your legacy? I'm always like, how did I make people feel? That's the most important thing. So yeah, I thank you for sharing.
Thank you for being here today. What a coincidence. I say a coincidence is God's way of staying anonymous in our lives, that you were so close to Jim Dottie, and he was such a good friend and mentor to me too.
Yeah, thank you. This was so wonderful, Charlie, and thank you for the work you do to make our world better.